A plus, A. Chapter 121, Might of the Treasured Saber. Ling Han sent a mental command, and this drop of indestructible true fluid instantly dispersed. Like dew, it moistened every single part of his body. His damaged internal organs, as well as his fractured bones, were healing at a terrifying pace. One has to understand, even with Ling Han's talent, he had still spent 10,000 years time to comprehend the first level of cultivation techniques of the indestructible heaven scroll. How could this single drop of indestructible true fluid that he had managed to congeal not be awesome? It could practically revive a dead person and allow new flesh to be grown on bones. It definitely could be claimed as the ultimate treasured medicine. Yi? Someone finally discovered that Ling Han had managed to sit upright, and a shocked expression flashed over his face. They were all very clear that none of them had made a killing move in the barrage of blows just now, but so many of them had all struck at the same time. Even if none of them made an attempt to kill, it should have been more than enough to cause serious injury to Ling Han. There was nothing to be done about it. Who asked this brat not to know what's good for him? In a way, this also allowed him to learn a valuable lesson. Yet the brat actually managed to so quickly get up. This was a big enough shock that their eyes were about to pop out from the astonishment. How could this be? Could it be that this brat was wearing some kind of treasured armor that could disperse part of the power behind any attacks that hit him? That should be the case. How could there be any other possibility? Brat, hand over the treasured saber. That is not something that you should wield. A middle-aged man shouted. Ling Han's eyes suddenly snapped open. The indestructible true fluid had completely exercised its effects, allowing him to mostly heal his injuries. He did not answer the speaker, but rather inserted his divine sense into the treasured saber in his hands to activate the spiritual tool concealed within the saber. He was no idiot. He could heal his injuries once with the help of the indestructible true fluid, but there was no way he could heal them a second time. Since he dared to grab food from the tiger's mouth, he would have to resuscitate this treasured saber. That way, what could a few gushing spring-tier martial artists do against him? He was Jiang Yofeng's master, and the former's martial arts were all taught by him. They were both of the same line of martial arts, so there was a high possibility that he could use the treasured tool left behind by Jiang Yofeng. This was a risk, but he could not consider too much about it anymore. How dare you ignore me, little junior? The middle-aged man who had spoken previously instantly grew furious. All of the people here were the heirs of the imperial family or the 8 great clans, so all of them had extremely high pride. How could they tolerate a junior putting on airs in front of them? He immediately acted. His origin power was given form, becoming a colossal palm which headed towards Ling Han in a grabbing motion. Li Yuan, you wish! Immediately, someone else made a move to stop him. He was, of course, not trying to help Ling Han, but it was rather that he feared this Li Yuan would take advantage of this opportunity to grab the treasured saber. Bastard! Li Yuan indeed had that kind of idea, and was enraged by this man's move to stop him. He could not help but immediately come to blows with the person who had attempted to stop him. Brat! Hand over the treasured saber! Another person rushed over with the intention to grab the saber. It's mine! Mine! The battle royale had once again begun. All of them were fighting with each other, trying to get close to Ling Han. Capturing this brat would mean they would be able to obtain the treasured saber. As for Ling Han's own power, they had all automatically ignored any threat he could pose to them. He was, after all, only a brat in the 5th layer of element gathering tier. You all, have you had enough? Ling Han suddenly stood, his eyes cast over the group, holding a gaze that trembled with power. All of them experienced a shock. It was as if the young man standing in front of them was not a little martial artist of element gathering tier, but an ultimate warrior even stronger than the elders of their respective clans. They all felt indescribably weak and minuscule in front of Ling Han, but they immediately came back to themselves. Just a little brat, and he actually gave them such a feeling? This was really much too shameful. Hand over the treasured saber quickly. Li Yuan once again moved, making a grabbing motion towards Ling Han. Get lost! Ling Han waved the saber in a slash. Shua, a bright flash washed out from the saber, as bright as a shooting star. Pooh! Li Yuan suddenly stumbled backwards, one hand pressing down on his chest. Fresh blood gushed forth from between his fingers, and his face had instantly turned pale. What? All of the others were flabbergasted with shock. One has to know that Li Yuan was in the 9th layer of Gushing Spring Tier, yet he was actually injured with one wave of Ling Han's saber. How could they accept this reality? The treasured saber. It must be the might of the treasured saber. It was nothing new for them to have obtained damaged spiritual tools. After all, it was as if all of them were dead. The value of them lay only in the martial intent engraved in the seals upon the body of these spiritual tools. But Ling Han had barely just obtained this treasured saber, yet he could actually activate the might of the treasured saber. How inconceivable was that? Ling Han stood, wielding the saber in his hands, and asked, "Just now, you all really had fun ganging up on me, huh?" Hiss! All of them could not help but take a step back. Who would have thought that a little junior in the 5th layer of Element Gathering Tier would suddenly possess the ability to pose a threat to high-level martial artists of Gushing Spring Tier? There was no way that Ling Han would stay nice. He pounced, and the treasured saber in his hand continuously spat out flashes of light. The might of the treasured saber was not something that mere Gushing Spring Tier martial artists could stand steadfast against. As the light from the treasured saber washed over them, without an exception, all of them were flung backwards from the power behind the blows. How could this be? This brat actually managed to resuscitate the spiritual tool. I don't believe it. All spiritual tools that can be successfully captured had their spirits deteriorated. Not even powerful warriors of spiritual ocean tier would be able to activate their abilities. Yet how could it be that a little brat of element gathering tier actually managed to activate the might of the spiritual tool? Everyone were gasping in astonishment, stuck in a state of absolute disbelief. But so what if they did not believe it? Now, they could only suffer a harsh thrashing from Ling Han's hands. Ah! They all shouted and screamed. Just now, Ling Han had suffered severe injuries from their hands, and now the tables were turned. So how could it be that he would be merciful towards them? As the light from the saber danced, all these people were easily thrashed. As for Liu Bucheng, his face continued to twitch uncontrollably. Thank goodness he had acted to stop Liu Yutong, and so did not take part in the ganging up on Ling Han. Otherwise, he would not have been missed out in this thrashing. To be thrashed in this manner by a little junior, how humiliating! But was this brat a monster? Why was it that he could activate an ancient spiritual tool? After Ling Han had heavily thrashed Li Yuan and the others, he stared at Liu Bucheng for a moment. This stare from Ling Han caused coldness to rise within the latter's heart, and Ling Han finally lowered the saber's hilt, sighing secretly. This saber was much too heavily damaged, and the spirit within was already long dead. The only thing left behind was a tiny scrap of consciousness. Because his martial intent was in the same vein as Jiang Yuefeng's, he managed to activate this scrap of consciousness, but he would not be able to use it many more times, before even this tiny scrap of consciousness would completely deteriorate. By that time, aside from being a bit sharper, there would be no difference between this saber and other normal weapons. Ling Han, are you all right? Liu Yutong and Li Xichan both stepped forward at the same time. How could this brat not be all right? Can't you two see that the others are all heavily thrashed? Liu Bucheng mocked in his thoughts. Ling Han was filled with troubled thoughts, so he only nodded towards these two girls before taking the saber and returning to his own tent. Though he had injured a lot of people, it was absolutely normal for injuries and fights to result from fighting over treasures. Moreover, with Wu Songlin's support and having to give face to Wu Songlin, who would dare say anything? Moreover, a large group of Gushing Spring Tier martial artists actually lost against a young man in the 5th layer of Element Gathering Tier. How could they actually lower their pride to say that they would attempt revenge or something of the sort? Ling Han sat within his tent and placed the saber on his lap, studying it closely. If the spirit within had not died, based on his current power, there was no way he could manage to control this saber. The saber would only need to emanate a little bit of aura, and he would be killed off. But now, this actually gave him the chance to study it closely. Zhang Yuefeng had broken through to heaven tier. Ling Han first confirmed this fact because the martial intent engraved in the seals on the saber had reached the level that was equal to his own level in his last life. Thus, it was without question that this was a spiritual tool that Zhang Yuefeng had forged after he had broken through to heaven tier. But a weapon of an ultimate warrior of heaven tier was actually heavily damaged in battle, and even the spirit within this spiritual tool was dead. What kind of enemy did Zhang Yuefeng actually encounter?